Mabuhay! Welcome to Group 1 Travel. We are heading on the land transportation and tourism. We will offer you an informative trip along the way about the importance of land transportation and tourism in tourism industry, and impact of this pandemic and their solution, current trends and issues on the land transportation industry and tourism local and international. And after that, we will have fun activity after the trip. Sit back and relax.
Land transportation and tourism.
Importance in tourism industry.
Transportation has been an integral part of the tourism industry. Transportation links tourists with various tourist attractions. Tourism sector is one of the main important sectors of the economy. Many countries take advantage of covering the budget deficit with the help of profits coming from tourism. Transportation, its role of movement of goods and people, decisively influences other branches of the world economy, including international tourism. Without transportation, there won't be the travel and tourism industry. People won't have means to reach another place that they desire to see.
Transport is important because it enables communication, trade, and other forms of exchange between people that in turn establishes civilizations. Transport plays an important part in economic growth and globalization, but most type cause air pollution and use a large amount of land. Public land transport refers to carriage of people and goods by government or commercial entities, which is made available to the public of large for the purpose of facilitating the economy and society they serve. Most transport infrastructure and large transport vehicles are operated in this manner.
Tourism continues to be the principal contributor to the world economic prosperity. The automobile has become the visible symbol of economic prosperity to the extent that past and present policies to curtail the explosion in the growth of vehicles is ineffectual. However, its economic prosperity has left very little room for the expansion of the supply of its road system. The land transportation problems threaten to damage the economy of each country, the bedrock of the thriving tourist industry. Current transportation policies excludes rental cars, making motorcycles the popular choice of tourists. Conflict among means of land transportation, resident and tourist road users, and the threat to the economy call for more drastic measures to deal with the problem.
Impact of this pandemic and their solution in land transportation and tourism.
The tourism industry is among the sectors that have been greatly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The closing of borders, airports, and hotels, as well as restriction on mass gathering, land travel, and related services across the world, put around 100 to 120 million jobs at risk. As estimated by the World Tourism Organization, in the first quarter of 2020, the period when the travel restriction and lockdown in most countries started, international tourist arrival declined by 22%, resulting in an estimated loss of $80 billion in global tourism receipts. In such period, 97 destinations have totally or partially closed their borders for tourists, and 65 destinations have suspended international flights totally or partially, and 39 destinations were implementing the closing of borders. In the Philippines, the government closed the airports in Luzon on 20th of March as part of Enhanced Community Quarantine, or the ECQ, that started in the island on 16th of March. The tourism sector has already felt the negative impact of the pandemic on its performance. Much earlier in other countries, travel restriction and measures have started as early as January of this year and have impacted the Philippine international tourist arrival. Domestic tourists, on the other hand, also limited their travel for fear of contracting COVID-19. The Department of Tourism reported international tourist receipt in the first quarter of the year declined to 85 billion pesos, or the 36% lower than the revenues in the same period last year. To understand the impact of pandemic or the COVID-19 pandemic on the Philippines tourism industry, PwC Philippines, together with the Department of Tourism, surveyed 247 decision makers across the different subsectors in May 2020. 44% of the respondents are from the tourism service sector, travel agency, booking, tours, etc. And 34 are from the accommodation sector. According to the survey, 97% say that the COVID-19 has the potential for significant impact on their business operation, and it is causing them great concern. Such finding is not surprising given that only business related to essential service and product were the only enterprises allowed to operate during the ECQ. Because of the low demand and restriction, majority of the respondents say that they temporarily stopped or offering a services product, reduce their level of operation, and reduce the employee headcount.
Recovering from this pandemic. To help recover from the pandemic, 78% of the respondents say that they need up to 5 million pesos in additional funding to help normalize their operations. Majority say that they need such funds for working capital requirements, marketing fund to rebuild their brands, and refinancing, with 91% of the respondents coming from the MSMEs or the micro, small, and medium enterprises. It's not surprising that 73% are planning to avail of government grants and subsidies to help revive their operations. In public transportation, the strategically locating like jeepney and bus and others to stop is scientific process and requires comprehensive data gathering to know passenger origin and destination patterns. The proper guidelines: limited passengers, having tracking device/logbook, improvise plastic cover to make a boundaries, allow the proper using of face mask and face shield, swab test/PCR tests. Project to develop the capacity of entrepreneurs and personnel in tourism to improve the quality of service and build confidence for tourists.
Would also have to be formulated to ensure safety and prevent choke points of traffic flow. The standard design of the jeepney stop also need to be developed. Jeepney NAMA in the Philippines 50 linking an enforcement mechanism to fleet management companies could make its implementation more efficient through strict adherence to agreed service standards that follows a schedule when drop-off and pick-up passenger at particular stops. Management companies could be liable to ensure that their units adhere to the stops. Otherwise, both the driver and the company will be penalized. Bayona 2015. For process, the introduction of a badge system for drivers which is based on points which are deducted for every violation and excludes driver from the system if they commit to many violations. This system could be part of performance-based service contracts as well.
The Philippines has beautiful island that will once again attract the tourists after pandemic. Nevertheless, the country should take this opportunity to rebuild the sector by helping the players upskill and digitalize, rethink the way they do business, and ensure compliance with safety and health standards. Promoting medical tourism and agri-tourism may be among the programs that the country can prioritize to help start the sector. While the Philippines is experiencing difficulties at this time, Filipinos should remember that through combined efforts and hard works in the past, the country was able to grow the tourism sector and made it one of the top GDP contributors. With the country's renewed commitment, Filipino can be confident that the tourism industry will achieve better success after this pandemic. Current trends and issues on the specific transportation industry, local and international.
Current trends on land transportation and tourism. According to an analysis by B2B research company Markets and Markets, the top transportation industry trends for 2018 are an increasing demand for electric or fuel cell-driven trucks, autonomous driving, electric or hybrid buses, truck flattening, and smart transportation solutions. These trends are in response to challenges facing truck and bus manufacturers from the external business environment. Demand for electric or hybrid vehicles to comply with emission battery electric trucks and buses that can operate on alternative fuel. Hybrid buses are increasingly being developed to comply with global limits on CO2 emissions. Electrifications of buses and trucks will involve changes in the structure design. Electric motors will be mounted into wheels and connected to battery packs, and fuel cell units integrated into the structure of the vehicle. The global electric truck market is projected to account for 10 to 15% of truck sales in various regions by 2025.
It is the time of year again. We will simultaneously look back at the year slipping away behind us and towards the shiny new year full of promise just ahead. It was a big year for cities to buy electric transit buses and ban diesel cars from city centers. Meanwhile, automakers such as Ford launched ever more enticing electric car models, such as its new Mustang Mach-E and e-scooter riding, which can replace car trips and reduce congestion, so unprecedented growth. And transportation-related emissions likely rose this year for the fourth year in a row. The hard data doesn't come out until early 2020, continuing to represent the single largest contributor to carbon dioxide emissions in the United States. In 2020, scooters officially will go mainstream and emerge as an uncontroversial tool to help commuters, tourists, and school kids get to where they want to go. People won't complain about scooters, they'll just ride them. Niggling controversy will remain over how cities and scooter companies will share and use data. A fun trend of decarbonizing delivery is the e-cargo bike. Cities such as New York City are giving incentives for delivery companies such as Amazon and UPS or United Parcel Service to deploy large numbers of e-cargo bikes that can drive in bike lanes and open to sidewalks for deliveries. E-cargo bikes are great because they are not only battery powered, but they also reduce congestion by removing big trucks from the roads, and they just make in tight urban neighborhoods where delivery trucks block lanes and cause major traffic.
Issues on land transportation and tourism in local. Poor countries have the most dramatic transport difficulties, and our country has its share of problems too. After years of advances in mobility, some negative trends are appearing. The general quality of transportation is declining with traffic congestion, parking shortages, and ever-increasing pollution, eroding the vitality of cities and threatening efficient operation of both passenger and freight systems. These conditions affecting both rich and poor nations show that transportation problems are universal. People in most countries complain of traffic congestion, air and noise pollution, poor public transport, inadequate maintenance, high accident rates, insufficient funds, and the disappearance of open space. Thus, there probably are a few common causes and in turn, some generally applicable remedies. Without effective transportation and access to jobs and resources, poor countries cannot provide for their own basic needs, much less contribute their share of world production, and they cannot help prepare for the additional 2 billion people coming before 2025. Nature provided no such gifts for transportation on land. Land transport was left to humans, and while roads and rails have increased mobility and access in wealthy places, the cost of building and maintaining such infrastructure remains a burden in less developed areas. Despite international aid, Poor countries may have so much debt that annual charges for interest and repayment are eating into foreign exchange reserves and slowing current development programs. In some years, rich countries get more money from poor countries than the poor get from the rich. Insufficient transportation may ultimately lead to critical shortage and skyrocketing prices that can threaten growing prosperity and world peace.
The top 3 top transport issues major global cities are trying to solve up until now are the private vehicle has been a major priority for transportation planners in many parts of the world. This historical focus on the movement of cars over the movement of people has given a rise to a number of challenging transport problems that affect both public transit agencies and private transport providers. The rising of population, the proliferation of cheap and efficient vehicles and urban sprawl have all made moving people even more challenging in major cities. Today's top 3 top transport challenges are congestion, sprawl, and costs that are very complex and requiring responses that are both very strategic and creative. These are the challenges now and in the future. There is no one single intergovernmental organization to deal with international land transport, discriminatory road charging, restrictive traffic quotas, restrictions on the use of foreign trucks on territory of particular countries, and last but not the least, the amount of time needed for police customs and security clearance for vehicles and drivers are some of the factors that influence directly the transport operator's choice of the traffic route. When these are the other factors are not adequately dealt with, traffic will be lost alternative routes involving waste on the side of transit countries, which loses potential income from transit traffic and the shipper who takes a less efficient or more expensive route. Additionally, the freight distribution, globalization, and the materialization of the economy have resulted in growing quantities of freight moving within cities, as freight traffic commonly shares infrastructures supporting the circulation of passengers. The mobility of freight in urban areas has become increasingly controversial. The growth of e-commerce and home deliveries has created additional pressures in the urban mobility of freight. City logistics strategies can be established to mitigate the variety of challenges faced by urban freight distribution. Many dimensions to urban transport challenges are linked with the dominance of automobile. On the other hand, lack of public transportation and traffic jams are major issues in many tourist destinations in developing tourism industry.